Rabbi Manis Friedman. Thank God it's Tuesday. The question today seems to be simple, but really, in reality, it's probably not so simple. And the question that I just asked our audience, our listeners, is it's not I asked them. The topic of our conversation today is how does the clothing that we wear affect our lives, or the lack of affect our lives and the world around us. And the reason I'm asking is because this Sunday I visited the city, and which I have not done in the longest time, Times Square in particular. And I will start with the extreme. People are walking around naked. I mean, really naked. And it's allowed these days, apparently. I feel like this old lady that hasn't seen the world in the longest time. But the people are actually walking around naked in Times Square. The police is there. And there's no such thing anymore as indecent exposure or anything like that. This is allowed. And my question is, and of course, yes, there's children there and everything. And my question is, how is this affecting our lives today? What is going on? Is it something we should be very concerned about, or is it something that we should probably think is progress and something that, maybe we are overreacting to the fact that such things are happening in our lifetime, in our days?
What do you think? Do you think it's a good sign or a bad sign? Don't hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you now. I'm sorry. All good.
So, instinctively, does it feel like a good thing or a bad thing?
Crazy thing. Insane thing. Abnormal thing. I don't know. But again, this is my perception. I mean, apparently it's not everybody's perception.
That it's not good? That it's crazy?
Yeah. I mean, is it enough to paint an American flag on your naked body and walk around with some feathers on your head?
Interesting look. I don't think it'll catch on. Because if it does, nobody will be interested anymore. It's only good for shock value. Once the shock is gone, nobody's interested.
The thing is, I didn't even see people being that shocked by it anymore. They're passing by, people are passing by, walking their way. I did not see people stare or be shocked.
So let's think about this for a minute. Adam and Chava ate from the tree of knowledge, and they were embarrassed by their nakedness, and they got dressed. Or they covered themselves with something. By eating from a tree of knowledge, they became ashamed of their nakedness. The simple conclusion is that if you have knowledge, you're ashamed. If you don't have knowledge, you're not ashamed. And this knowledge is not academic. I mean, it's not like they read a bunch of books and became scientists. This knowledge means wisdom, maturity. If you're wise and mature, you are ashamed of your nakedness. If you're not wise or not mature, then you're not ashamed of your nakedness. Like children. Obviously, children are not ashamed. They haven't developed the wisdom or the maturity to have shame, to blush. So back in 1991, I gave out a book called Doesn't Anyone Blush Anymore? That was a long time ago. And already it became obvious that people are losing the blushing reaction or reflex. Why do we blush? Because we're embarrassed, we're ashamed. What is that instinct? What is that? Are animals ashamed? Do animals blush? I don't know. But humans definitely do. What is that? A good thing or a bad thing? Can you imagine if we never felt shame? Would that make us more human or less human? In practical language, would that make us easier to get along with or harder to get along with? Now you might think, a person who never blushes, who is never ashamed, they're so easy to get along with. They never get embarrassed. You don't have to watch what you're saying because they won't take offense and they'll never be embarrassed. It's a pleasure to be with them. On the other hand, they'll embarrass you all the time because they don't know what it means to be ashamed. So what is this shame reflex? That's really what we need to consider. Now, some people, very liberal, will say, there's no such reflex. It's culture. You were taught to be ashamed. You were taught to be embarrassed. But really, there is nothing ever to be ashamed of, and there is nothing ever to be embarrassed by. No, that's not true. You can't fool people into a biological reaction. Shame is a biological reaction. You can't make it up. You can convince people what there is to be ashamed of. Like, some people will blush deeply if it turns out that they don't understand how the stock market works. That would be very embarrassing to some people. To other people, it's not embarrassing. I don't know the stock market. I don't care. But if I don't know the 10 Commandments, oh, will I blush. So culture, nurture can convince me what should make me blush. But the blush instinct is pure nature, not nurture. So what is that instinct? Why do we have that? So I guess we can break it down to 3 kinds of shame or embarrassment. Like, for example, you're walking down the street and you slip on a banana peel or on the ice and you fall flat on your back and all the people standing around are laughing, which is cruel. You're going to blush. You're going to be terribly embarrassed. What caused the shame? Your fragility. You're so fragile. You're so easily knocked off your feet by a banana peel. So what is it that has been hurt or compromised? Your ego. Your human dignity. In other words, the frailty of human condition has been exposed. You can actually argue that if you ever slip on a banana peel, there's no reason for you to be ashamed. Is there a human being in the world who would not slip if he stepped on a banana peel? Is that some kind of personal failure on your part? No, that's a human being. If you walk on ice, you're going to slip. If you walk on water, you're going to drown. Don't be ashamed of it. It's the human condition. But sometimes when our humanity, meaning our limitations, are exposed, we blush. Yes, it's a human condition. It's embarrassing. That's one kind of embarrassment. Another kind of embarrassment is you're looking for somebody in their room, in their office, and you walk into the door and you realize it's the wrong room. You walked into the wrong door. Oh, you're going to blush. Why? You crossed a border that you should not have crossed. You stepped into something you shouldn't have stepped into. In other words, you find yourself where you don't belong. You're out of place. That takes many, many forms. Like you offer an opinion and you realize you don't know what you're talking about. Well, you stepped through it and now you're embarrassed because you shouldn't have gone there. Don't argue with Einstein about relativity. So that's another form of embarrassment. It's not human frailty. It's an inappropriateness. There's nothing inappropriate about slipping on a banana peel. It's not like, oh, you shouldn't have done that. You should. So they're very different causes of embarrassment. The banana peel is perfectly natural, but sometimes nature is embarrassing because it shows how vulnerable we are. Walking through the wrong door, I mean, that's a mistake. Pay attention. Know where you're going. And if you don't, well, you're embarrassed. You walked into the wrong. Then there's a third embarrassment, and that is guilt. I misbehaved. I did something I was not allowed to do. Walking into the wrong door is not a sin. It's not immoral behavior. It's just not where you belong. But then there's the guilt feeling. I did what I should not have done. I violated a law, not a border. These are three very distinct kinds of shame. Now, imagine if we didn't have those reactions. Would we still be human beings? No, we would be monsters. You poke your head into every door you walk by, you're not a human being. You'll cross any border, you have no sense of propriety. You'll offer opinions on things you know nothing about. You'll walk off with things that don't belong to you, aside from the crime aspect. You don't know where you belong. You don't know your place. That's a form of insanity. The sages say a person who sleeps in a cemetery is crazy, can be considered insane and not guilty or liable for their behavior. Sleeping in a cemetery, what's so terrible? It's not ghosts and goblins. You have no sense of where you belong, where things are appropriate. If you laugh at a funeral or cry at a bar mitzvah, you're out of place. You have no bearings. You don't know where you are. If we didn't notice those things, would we be human? Hardly. If we were not embarrassed by the fact that humans are so frail, we would be egomaniacs. There were people like that in history who thought they were literally God and that they could not be killed. They went into battle believing that they're immortal. Is that sane? So if you're not a little embarrassed just by human the human condition, then you're out of your mind. You're out of touch with reality. And if being caught misbehaving doesn't embarrass you, then you're a sociopath. You accept no rule, well, then you can't live among people. You're not fit for civilization. So these things are not weaknesses. Blushing is not a curse. It's what makes us human. And isn't it interesting how the Torah tells us everything we need to know? It's all there. What was the first emotion described for human beings in the Torah?
Embarrassment.
Mm-hmm. To be a human being, the first thing you have to learn is to be embarrassed. So why do we wear clothes? The conventional wisdom is because when they ate from the tree of knowledge, they matured to where they, like children who know nothing about sex and sin and passions. But when they ate from the tree of knowledge, they matured and they realized that the body can be very sinful. Okay. That can make you blush. But you can go a little bit deeper than that. It wasn't guilt that they felt because they hadn't done anything sexual. There was no mention of that in the story. So why would they suddenly become aware of sexuality or the sinful side of sexuality? I mean, they were still in the Garden of Eden. I mean, that's practically heaven. So it wasn't the third shame, the shame of having committed a sin. So they weren't embarrassed by the fact that they ate from the tree, which was the sin. They were embarrassed that you can have sexual sins. Where did that come from? They were embarrassed by the second type of shame, no borders. And that's true. When they were created in a very innocent state, they had no sense of borders. What is mine? What is yours? What is me? What is not? Once they realize that there are borders, I am not you, you are not me, I don't belong in your space, you don't belong in my space, you got to respect those borders. That's what made them embarrassed. And that's why their immediate reaction was to dress, to draw a border, to put a separation and distinction between me and you. What is private for me is private. What's private for you, you keep private. Recognize the borders. Otherwise, you'll always be hurting each other. You'll always be trespassing, like Me Too. So we've come full circle. Adam and Eve ate from the tree of knowledge and realized that they're molesting each other by violating each other's borders. Took 5,000 years and we caught up. Now we realize that you have to respect people's borders. Even if you're not raping somebody, but if you're violating their border, that's a form of abuse.
Rabbi Friedman, but who's violating whose borders? The ones who are dressed or the ones who are undressed?
Dressing is just one form of respect of borders. But you expand that to all sorts of behavior, insensitive to people's borders. A man exposes himself to a woman, he goes to jail. Why? What did he do? It's so harmless. No, it's not. So let's take that a little step deeper. We know that we can hurt people with what we say, right? A person talks too much and thoughtlessly, carelessly. He's going to say things that will hurt people. He's going to reveal secrets he shouldn't be revealing. He's going to say things that are way too personal to be said in public, right? So you can really violate yourself and others by talking. You're not hitting anybody. You're not stealing anything. You're just talking. And I was just saying. How that can't possibly be harmful, can it? Well, aside from the fact that you can destroy a person's life with a few words, a few well-chosen words can be deadly. Aside from that, if you talk too much, what happens is that you stop thinking. So there should be a process. There is awareness, then there is thought, then there is speech. There are emotions, then there's thought, then there's speech. You feel something, you think about it, you speak about it. But what if you skip the thought? You feel something, you say it. You discovered something, you talk about it. You are overexposing. And that causes you to stop thinking, because you're taking a shortcut. I felt it, I said it. I realized it, I talked about it. In other words, you're giving off emotions and awareness before they matured. You had a feeling before you thought about it, before you considered it, before you analyzed what the feeling is and to whom and why and whether it's appropriate or inappropriate. As soon as the feeling comes, you say it. That's a form of nudity. You're exposing things before they're ready to be exposed, or things that were never meant to be exposed. I remember asking when I was a little boy, bar mitzvah age, and I said to my mashpia, to my teacher, I said, we were walking home from yeshiva, I said, can I talk to you for a minute? I want to get something off my chest. And he said, why? Why do you want to get it off your chest? Maybe it's something you should keep in your chest. Think about that for a minute. In the 60s, people were very, very open. You felt like doing something, you did it. A thought came to your mind, you said it. It was horrible. I remember once speaking to a group of people, and a woman sitting in the group suddenly said, why can't women sitting in the women's section of the synagogue, why can't they just do what they came to do? Why is there so much talking going on? It really hurts me. I can't. And she starts to cry bitter tears. And everybody was like, oh, I'm sorry. They were very sympathetic. But it was so inappropriate. Oh, I know you have emotions. I know you have feelings. But where do they belong? We weren't talking about synagogues. We weren't talking about davening. We were engaged in a conversation about something. Where do you suddenly burst out like that? Inappropriate. Don't get naked in front of everybody. Nobody wants to see it. Nobody wants to hear it. Why are you imposing it? You want everybody to cry with you? We're in the middle of doing something. So, nakedness means you're exposing something of yourself that maybe you really need to keep for yourself. Okay. Here's the amazing thing. If you're not thoughtful, then your words become out hollow. You can tell a person is talking and he hasn't really thought about it. The words are thin, they're hollow. They have no weight. It's like they tell singers, never hit a note that you can't go higher. Don't expose your limit. When you hit a certain note and people know if you went one note higher, you would crack. So it should always be left like, there's more. I could have gone higher. A person speaks on a subject and you realize they've told you all they know. There's nothing more. That's it. They've run dry. You lose respect. There should always be something more that you're not revealing. Now, here's the amazing thing. We have sexual energy, which is the most powerful creative energy in the universe. It can reproduce a human being. Awesome. It can also create great intimacy between people. That energy can either be mature or immature, meaning you can either expose it properly, and then it is creative, productive, and so on, or like a person who talks too much, you can just let it out and dissipate it into the air. How do you dissipate sexual energy? The body has the energy. Every part of your body can, to some degree, express sexuality. Not consciously or intentionally. Your body gives off sexual energy, particularly the skin. People who don't get dressed, the nudists, have very little sex, and they have no intimacy whatsoever. You think people are running around naked, they're probably having sex all the time. No, they're hardly ever having sex. Isn't that true? So you can say, well, because they're bored. No, not because they're bored. They've already expressed all their sexual energy through their skin. So when it comes time to be intimate, they've got no energy left. So it's like the flirt. Flirts with everybody. Is, best friends with everybody, which means he has no best friends. Because he uses up this powerful energy in shallow, cheap ways, and then there's nothing left for the real thing. So people who have a lot of sex have no intimacy, and people who are undressed have no sex. It's used up. You've wasted it. So getting dressed simply means I will retain my sexual energy for when it is appropriate and necessary. So I will have sex, and the sex will be intimate. So what's happening to our society, and this is what happened to Rome and to Greece and to all the extinct societies, they overexposed. They wasted it. Probably in more than just nudity. They probably wasted their thoughts, they wasted their emotions. They didn't allow any of it to mature. So as soon as they had an opinion, they had to make a philosophy out of it. As soon as they had an emotion, they had to act on it. They had to say something.
Rabbi Friedman. Mm-hmm. But there is such a thing as full nudity, the extreme that is happening in Times Square and I'm sure in other places. But there's also summertime and there is just light clothing where the private areas are all covered, but there's still tank top, shorts, and things like that. So it's not full nudity. It's something that is acceptable by the society, has been for the longest time. Is this also improper and wrong, or is that something that's okay?
It depends on how seriously you want to take your own sexuality. You know, a little wasted sexuality, what's the harm, right? For some people, and that's why married women cover their hair, because hair can also give off sexuality. So when you're not married, okay, so you give off a little. Nicht gefährlich, you know? But when you're married, you keep it all for the intimate moments, for the intimate time. So here's what you said, private parts. What constitutes private parts? What makes some part private?
The reproductive ones, the nurturing ones. Well, not like the hands, but, you know, I'm talking about women, if I can still use that word.
I understand. But to appreciate what that means, what do you mean that's private? You could use the word sacred. No. That's for special use. That's not for everyday consumption. That's for special, right? That's called private. If you think about it, just logically, just for a moment, private parts of the body begin at your knees and upwards, and from your elbow and upwards. Why limit your private parts to a few inches? The private parts are the parts that you use for intimacy. Correct?
I'm sorry, I'm going to have to ask, how do knees and elbows come into play here?
Okay. When you embrace someone, intimate, where does that happen? From your elbows and up. If you embrace somebody from your wrists and up, you're a little allergic. Right? That would be awkward and weird. You embrace somebody by enveloping them in your upper arms. How do you cuddle a child? So from your elbows and up, that's used for intimacy. Mark it private. From the knees and up, that's how you're intimate. Not from your ankles. So what part of your body is dedicated to intimacy? It's very sad if the part of the body that is dedicated to intimacy consists of 2 inches. That's it? Wow, your intimate life is tiny. So I mean, we know this. It's not a secret. Remember, there was this actress, teenage girl, very, very popular.
Britney Spears?
No, way back. I don't know what her name. But she was in a commercial for jeans. And the camera like panned over her legs, you know. And people were horrified. You know, she's underage, you can't do that to her, what are you doing? So, well, she was wearing jeans. But the camera went between her knees, and people were horrified. So we know that's a little too much of a violation of private space. We got upset. People got upset because it was a teenager. If she was a little older, we would allow it. But why? You already admitted that that's intimate. You know, in the same way that holding hands, a man and a woman holding hands, is that intimate?
Yes.
Well, I hope so. People say, yeah, but shaking hands, no, that's not intimate. No? What's the difference between holding hands and shaking hands?
Well, I would say the difference is what you apply there. I mean, shaking hands could be a business deal, and you know, you're shaking hands in a business-like manner, and then there's holding hands with your husband or your boyfriend or whoever that is, you know, has a different
intention.
Yes.
But that can be so misread, right? If the difference is in intention, every time a man shakes a woman's hand, oh, what is your intention? Because it could be right? It could be you're intending. So the act itself, you say, can go either way, depending on your intention. Well, there's going to be a lot of misunderstanding going on. Today, I think you can probably have a guy arrested for shaking your hand, if you can prove his intention. So the difference between shaking hands and holding hands is 2 seconds. If he shakes your hand and holds it for 2 seconds more than necessary, he's creepy. He's a creep. So, well, what happened? Well, he held my hand too long. How much is too long? 2 seconds. Shaking hands, unless you're wrestling, shaking hands is intimate. Physical contact that is affectionate is intimate. Why are we depriving ourselves of this? Why do we keep stealing from our intimate life and making it public and impersonal? So holding hands is nothing. I want to hold your hand. That's so cute. Teenagers should walk around holding hands. What are you doing? You can't fool Mother Nature. A hug is just friendly. A kiss, just 2 kisses. Okay, just friendly. Where do you stop? So let's go back to the dress code.
Rabbi Friedman, as far as the dress code is concerned, we also made a culture out of it. And I mean, it's always been a culture because every age, every millennium is identified by a certain dress code. And I actually wanted to speak more about that, but unfortunately we'll be running out of time very, very soon. But for instance, the fashion industry, which has been a huge part of our life now. It's still a huge part of our life. It's very flashy, very designer, very expressive, very flashy, I don't know, very outgoing. I can use a lot of adjectives here. but it's something that identifies people in our lifetime, even more so than ever, individuality and so on and so forth. How should we treat that aspect of our current life, our reality of our days?
I think most people would agree that today's design in clothing is meant to expose, not to cover. It's meant to emphasize, draw attention to body parts. It's meant to reveal, not to conceal. So it does the exact opposite of what it's supposed to do. Now, there is a cultural consideration in what we might call suggestive. You dress in a way that suggests nudity. You know, interesting? You're dressing in a way that makes people notice the nudity. So, for example, in a culture where women wear skirts down to their ankles, and one woman walks around with her ankles exposed, that's not a violation of modesty in the technical sense of the word, but she's being suggestive. And that's immodest in behavior, not in dress. Modesty in dress means the parts of the body that engage in intimacy should be reserved for intimacy. So from your knees and up, from your elbows and up, both men and women should be covered. Otherwise, you're dissipating sexual energy that you will.
So sorry about that. We never stop on time because it's not. I don't want to. I don't want to. It's too important. Our conversations are always a lot more important than the time and everything else that's going on. So I'm so sorry about this interruption, Rabbi Friedman. Please go on.
So the point is, if you don't cover your body that is designed for intimacy. So we know, of course, the sexual organs are designed for intimacy, but that's not the only parts. The knees and up and the elbows and up, that's meant for intimacy. You don't hug people you hate. So instead of wasting all of that energy and being left with no power, no strength for intimacy, that's how a society becomes extinct. You're sexually depleted. Why is everybody on Viagra? Because we deplete it. We waste sexual energy, and then when we need it, we have none.
Rabbi Friedman, amazing. This was a great, important conversation. I hope we're not ahead of our times with this conversation, and that people are catching on to what we're saying and understanding how to conserve and conceal what is most precious to us and what we should be really, really protective of. So thank you so much. This was amazing. And I personally look very much to seeing you today in person at the Jewish Russian Learning Center of North Shore of Staten Island, 44 Oswald Place. If somebody still did not register, it's not too late. And we are very excited. On Staten Island, you make those visits to us very rarely, and this is one of those incredible, rare opportunities where we get to see you and hear you in person and ask questions and get a lot of insights and wisdom into the real truth and the real essence of life. So thank you so much again. 44 Oswald Place in Staten Island today at 7 p.m. And Rabbi Friedman, thank you so much. Thank you so much for your wisdom, for your time, and for just helping us live properly, the right way, the smart way, the wise way. Thank you so much.
To sum it up, can I?
Absolutely.
Don't spend money when you're not buying anything. Don't say things that don't mean anything. And don't be sexual when you're not having sex. Be real. That's reasonable.
That's great advice. Common sense, logical, wise, and amazing. So hopefully we're grown up enough nowadays to actually use it in our lives. Again, thank you so much. And until 7 p.m. tonight at Jewish Russian Learning Center on 44 Oswald Place in Staten Island. Thank you very, very much, Rabbi Friedman.